afternoon, everyone. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
Hi, I'm Jolie Fisher, and we are drawing to the end of Women's History Month. We got a month. I hope that it is a beautiful day wherever you are. Maybe if it's not beautiful, who cares? After this, breathe in some of that, go outside in the sunshine or the rain and just soak that up. Good Pesach, happy Passover. It is also Palm Sunday, whatever faith you are in devotion of, let this day and this week wash over you. Happy spring. I want to encourage and enlighten and educate and engage and maybe possibly enrage some of you or each other today. And I know I won't be alone in doing that. Look at this fabulous group of humans in front of you. I would be remiss if I didn't say that everything that I do, and I know that most of you feel the same way, the things that we do these days, that how we write, how we speak, how we communicate, how we perform, how we navigate life is from a place of reverence for the past year and what we've all experienced. So I just wanted to take one inhale and one exhale for the almost 600,000 people that we lost, and their families and their friends. They are mothers, they are sons, they are daughters, they are brothers and sisters, and all of those people who are in their lives who mourn their loss. We just have to say it because it's happened, and then we get to work, right? So that collective deep in and exhale that we did was started at the beginning of January. I think we feel like something we've gotten something off of our shoulders. But then we realized that this is where the work starts, right? In 1979, although I was very, very, very young, I remember the letters ERA. And as a grown-up, sort of, a woman raised by a single working badass mother, Connie Stevens, she was sparkly and she was fierce and she was in charge, and she raised her children. I never thought there was not a place for the rights of women. I never imagined that was the case. So somebody sent this to me today, or somebody posted this: never apologize for burning too brightly or collapsing into yourself every night. That's how galaxies are made. So here you are. This is our galaxy right now. Here are some of the stars in our galaxy. We have the voters of tomorrow. We have Generation Ratify. We have these beautiful activists, and we have seen some of the work of these young women and men. Some of the ladies are on with us today. This is Generation Z. I have 5 children. I'm a mother of Generation Z. So I feel like I'm so inspired by these young people, and I can't wait for you all to hear from them in a minute. But right now, we have Representative Carolyn Maloney from New York and Senator Pat Spearman from Nevada, who are in the forefront of this fight to bring the ERA to the Constitution finally after all of these years. So ladies, if you would love to speak, we would love to have you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I got to tell you, when I first got into politics, no one looked like me. It was all men. I was always the only woman in the room usually. So to see so many young women leaders and voters, and I just am very excited about this. I want to thank Jolie Fisher and Sarah Beth Rosenberg, the voters of tomorrow, Generation Ratify, for inviting me to this discussion. And I'm thrilled to be here with trailblazing women. One of my heroines, including Senator Pat Spearman, who pushed the ERA to ratification in Nevada and then inspired Illinois and Virginia to do the same thing, so that we now have 38 states enough to ratify. And I also read on the program that my own constituent, Deborah Messing, whose efforts for gender equality and empowerment of women have helped push our movement forward. Certifying the Equal Rights Amendment is more important than ever, and an effort that's been over 100 years in the making, especially when it comes to equity in all walks of life, but especially in the workplace. Last week was Equal Pay Day, but it's not a celebration. The day marks the extra days and weeks it takes American women to earn the same pay that their male counterparts made the previous year, 3 extra months of work just to earn the same pay. And if you compound it on average over a lifetime, it comes to over $900,000. So it's incredibly unfair. And the gender pay gap is even worse for women of color. For every dollar paid to white men, Asian American women overall are paid 87 cents. Black women are paid 63 cents. Native American women are paid 60 cents. And Latinos are paid just 55 cents. March 24th is All Women's Equal Pay Day, reflecting the average across races and ethnicities. Asian American and Pacific Island Women's Pay Day is March 9th. Black Women's Equal Pay Day isn't until August 3rd. Native American Women's Equal Pay Day isn't until September 8th. And shamefully, Latino Women's Equal Pay Day isn't until October 21st. This is a disgrace and has long-term consequences for women and families. And on each of these days, I think we should come back and show, do something on these days to put a spotlight on it again. I can tell you that all of this unfair pay, when you compound it, it ends up in women being the largest segment of poverty in the United States. I just want to briefly say that almost 100 years ago, after the ratification of the 19th Amendment, my family's aunt, suffragist Alice Paul, along with other suffragists, turned their sights on a new and important constitutional change. They authored the Equal Rights Amendment, and they introduced it in Seneca Falls, New York. But by the time it passed in 1972, opponents had added an arbitrary time limit to it. Well, if they can add an arbitrary time limit, we can remove that arbitrary time limit. And last week, the House of Representatives voted to remove that time limit from the Equal Rights Amendment, stating that there is no time limit on equality. And it is our goal this year to push that through the United States Senate. And for the past 4 generations, and I'm so glad to see all the new young life here, feminists like myself have been marching, lobbying, attempting to win lawsuits and defeating anti-ERA legislators. By getting and enshrining the Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution, we will give ourselves the legal bedrock to finally achieve justice for women. And let me just say that we will never have equal pay for equal work unless we enshrine it in the Constitution. It's that simple. It's not enforceable unless it has the constitutional backing. So it is incredibly important to protect women from social justice, for social violence, for equal pay. It's the most important thing that we can be doing to help women. And when you help women, you help America. When women succeed, America succeeds. I'm so happy to be part of this new generation, your energy, your vision, your strength, and I look forward to learning from you today. Thank you. I yield back.
Wow, thank you so much. No time limit on equality. Senator Spearman.
Thank you. Wow. I should have gone first. I don't really like to follow Representative Maloney, but I'll play the hand I'm dealt. So first of all, I want to thank you all for inviting me today. And it is really wonderful to see so many, an intergenerational group that is pressing forward to not just get the ERA in the Constitution, but to make sure that once it's there, that we have elected officials who will pursue laws and statutes, et cetera, to make sure that it is implemented. So let me say this, and I just want to pick up on something that Representative Maloney just said. She said when she got into politics, there weren't that many people that looked like her. When I got into politics 25 years ago, there were very few people that looked like me. I think there was one African-American senator, and I'm trying to figure out who was in the House of Representatives, but below the federal level, there were even less. And when I was elected to the Nevada State Senate, I looked like some of the people who had been there before, but if you did some further scrutiny, I was not. I ran as an out same gender loving woman, and that had never happened anywhere in the state of Nevada. We did have a David Parks, who was out, an out gay white man, but it was unheard of for a Black woman with all of these things, quote, against me to say something like that. And Representative Maloney is right. You know, women represent the largest segment of those in poverty, but they also represent the largest segment of people who retire and continue to be in poverty. And that is because of no equal pay, for no other reason than we're women. We're women. And, you know, last session in 2019, I carried a bill that provided for equal pay in Nevada. And I always like to thank Patty Arquette, because she came to testify on behalf of that. And one of the things we did in Nevada, and I'm going to encourage everyone who is looking at this from a state level to do the same thing. When you don't get equal pay, it's not just a paycheck that hurts you, but it is the FICA, it is the vacation time, it's the 401k, it's what you could get in terms of health insurance. It's all of those things, So Senate Bill 166 that I keep forgetting the chapter that it's enrolled in, but Senate Bill 166 that was passed in the 2019 session, we also made it a part of that law to make sure that whatever the NERC, Nevada Equal Rights Commission, said you were owed was multiplied by the highest interest rate in the state on that day. If you had $100,000 and the highest interest rate in the state on that day, it just wasn't home ownership, it was whatever the highest interest rate on that date. If it was 5%, it was 100,000 times 5%. And we did that because I wanted to make sure that we added some more onto it. And maybe we won't get all the way to what they've missed, but we will get halfway there. And I think it's important also, as we push forward to the ERA and being in the Constitution, let's push forward and say that's just step one. That's just step one. Because the next thing we have to do, or I say concurrently, we've got to make sure that we are electing people, not only at the federal level, but at the state level, at the municipal level, at the county level, up and down the ballot. We've got to make sure that we are electing people who believe in equality and who believe in equity. Because, you know, now equality has become a buzzword, you know, and I hear some people talking about equality, but they don't support it. So equality and equity. And that's important because unless we elect people who understand the deficit that we have lived in all of these decades, and yes, even these centuries, then we will never be able to get to equality and then move on to equity. And that's important. That's important. This is the second session that the Nevada State Legislature has a majority of women. That's important. That's important. I don't know that there's another state that has got to that level yet, but here's what happens when you elect women. And I know that there's some men who believe the same thing, but here is what happens when you elect women. You get the pay equity bill. You get a bill for family leave. You get a bill for childcare. You get a bill. This time we're carrying a bill, our majority leader, and she's the first female majority leader in 150 years. In Nevada. You look at the wall in the legislature and it shows all of the majority leaders and the president pro tempore, and you see all white men. There are a couple of Black men. One of them is our Senate, is our representative from Congressional District 4, Stephen Horsford. He was the first African-American from Nevada elected. But our majority leader, Senator Canizaro, is carrying a bill, this is radical, y'all, is carrying a bill that will allow pharmacists to dispense to women hormonal contraceptives without having to go to the doctor. And you would be surprised at the number of people and what is said to make sure that that doesn't happen. When you elect women, you also find people. I'm carrying a bill this time that will encourage Congress to sign on to Cedaw. I don't remember who it was, but somebody challenged me on Twitter and said, at Senator Spearman, hey, why don't you sign on? Why don't you get something going to Cedaw? And I think when they challenged me, we weren't in session, but I did do that. And so when you elect women, especially now, you are providing an opportunity. Once that the 28th Amendment is ratified, we're already going to work to make sure that hearts and minds are changed, but also state statutes are changed. State statutes are changed. You know, I've got a bill that is encouraging Congress to provide a federal level retirement system for, watch this, military spouses. There are some things that are unequal in everyday life that we've just kind of taken for granted. And even though military spouses include men, most of the time they are women, and they follow their spouse all over the world. And if they have a professional degree, if they've been trained for counseling, for nursing, whatever they've been trained for, they are never there long enough to get a pension started, never. And so a federal pension does just that. And when I looked at it, I said, you know, this will help men, but it will also help the women for whom stay with that spouse for 20 years, only to find out that when the person retires, sometimes they are axed out because the person has found somebody else and they've fallen in love. So they've got 20 years, they have nothing to show for it. It's important for us to elect people who believe in equality and in equity, and make sure at every point, at every turn, we are looking at women. And it's not just any woman, because when we passed the passed the legislation in our Senate this last week for the Equal Rights Amendment in the Nevada State Constitution, there was a woman who voted against it. There were some women in the assembly who voted against it. So it's not just a woman for the sake of women, but it is women who believe in this fight, And I'll say this and then I'll be done. I think that for the foreseeable future, we owe it to the people who have fought so hard to get us here. The people who knew that one day it would happen, but also realized it might not happen in their lifetime. But they grabbed a hold of hope and they held on. Some of them have held on since the 50s, some 60s, some 70s, 80s, 90s, and some even today are still holding on. And they're holding their breath and they're waiting and waiting and waiting. And they're hoping that the 28th Amendment will become a reality. We owe it to them not to give up the fight. I don't care what some man, a male judge says, we do not give up. That's why we win. We don't give up. Thank you.
There are so many, thank you so much, Senator Spearman, Congressman Maloney. There are so many questions that are coming in. And one of the major questions obviously is, what is the status? We know the time limit has been lifted, but what are the paths forward for the ERA becoming part of the Constitution? And there's a couple of questions from Eileen Davis. So I'll just put them out there and then you guys can answer, because I want you guys to hear from this Gen Z group. They're incredible. Either one of you, so good to see you again. Can you please explain to our young activists the ways we can push through the predictable resistance we are currently facing? And also to explain to the young advocates the difference between and the connections between equality and equity. And yes, Cedaw, Council for the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. That is from, those questions are from Eileen Davis. So I don't know who wants to take those.
Oh, you're muted. You're muted.
The Cedaw Treaty, I have the legislation in the House in support of Cedaw, but treaties are ratified in the Senate. Roughly 169 countries have ratified Cedaw. It really is a a document with the United Nations calling for the empowerment of women in healthcare, treating them well, equality, opportunity. It should be like having a glass of milk in the morning or water. It should have passed long ago. And we alone, I believe, are among the only country in the world. If I just passed a bill on on the birth of a child, paid leave for the birth of a child. There were 2 countries in the world, New York, or I'm saying New York, but meaning the United States and Papua New Guinea. I mean, how crazy is that? But finally we passed it, so now it's only Papua New Guinea. But it's the same thing with Cedaw. Practically every country in the world has passed and ratified it. 169 countries can't be wrong. We should be with them. I hope to pass the bill in the House and put more pressure on the Senate. Simply put, we in 72 had a time limit added at the last moment. And then they're saying that the time limit has expired, so now we have to go back and start all over. Well, actually, I put in a bill starting all over to make the point that we are never going to give up, as many of you've said. And we cannot fail, adding to what Senator Spearman said, because the obstacles in front of us are far less than what our founding mothers did or had it with them. Alice Paul was put in jail for thinking that a woman should have the right to vote. She was put into an insane asylum and called insane that she thought a woman should have the right to vote. They would be chained themselves to the White House and all be arrested and thrown in jail. So the obstacles that they overcame were much more than what we face. So I feel like we have to succeed because it's much easier for us. If you think of what was in front of those founding mothers, it was unbelievable. So we put in a bill to remove the deadline. We passed it in the House, it's in the Senate, and you need to get 60 votes to pass it. The way you can help is by reaching out to your senators, especially in red states. I'd say every Democrat is for it, and ask them to support the legislation. It's that simple. And I have great respect for anything that passes the United States Congress and gets that fragile flower of consensus. It's very difficult to achieve. And I think if you have a senator who's opposed to it, go to their offices and ask them, why don't you want me to have equal opportunity? Ask them. I don't understand their opposition to it, but I'm so great to see the new generation taking this up. Thank you. I yield back.
Well, maybe they can jump on. We have Grace Friedman from Voters of Tomorrow and Lizzie Koumans from Generation Ratify and Sari Beth Rosenberg, who's all of our American APUSH history teacher. They can tell us what the pathways forward, perhaps, and a little bit of the history of why this thing hasn't been passed.
That sounds perfect. So I'm everyone's American history teacher and also an honorary member of Gen Z, or so I tell them to say that, but I'm actually Gen X. So Lizzie and Grace, I want to amplify your voices. I could go through a history lesson, but I do that every day. So let's toss it to Lizzie, I want to hear about your role at Generation Ratify and tell us how you got into it. And then tell us how we get, I think Congresswoman Maloney did a great job actually already telling us the history. So you get an A+, Congresswoman Maloney, on that history. I give you an A+, a 5 on the AP exam. So I think we know that, it originated in 1923 and it's 2021. And we're very close. So I want to hear from Lizzie and then Grace, what got you inspired to get into this century-old fight and take it home for us? So Lizzie, tell us how you got involved with Generation Ratify. What inspired you?
Absolutely. Of course, I'd be so happy to join this discussion. And thank you so much, Representative Maloney and Senator Spearman. We are so happy to have you here. So hi, everyone. As she said, I'm Lizzie Koumans. I'm 16 and I'm a junior in high school. So very much a Gen Zer. I'm very much a young person. And I joined Generation Ratify almost right at its very beginning, which was back in 2019. It actually started with just a couple of 15-year-olds meeting up at the local library, doing phone banking, reaching out to voters across the United States, really just pushing for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, starting on that local level. And just about 6 months after we started pushing for the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment in Virginia, it passed in Virginia, making Virginia the 38th state, as we just talked about, which was obviously an incredible push towards everything we had been working for and was so inspiring for us. But as you asked, you were asking me how I even got interested in this in the first place. And this is something I love to talk about. So it was January 21st, the day after President Donald Trump had been inaugurated. And in 2017, I went to the Women's March with my sister and my mom. And although I'm not totally in support of, you know, everything that's gone on since then, but that Women's March was so inspiring to me, seeing those about 1 million women just walking the streets of Washington, D.C., so passionate and so angry, so frustrated with what our government is doing and what they aren't doing for women. But another thing, and a big thing I think we forget about, is it's not just women, it's all genders, it's all marginalized genders. And again, that's something that we as the youth of today, we as Generation Ratify, we push so hard to make sure that this movement is so intersectional. It's not just the things that you usually associate with sex. It's not just the realm that the people who wrote the Equal Rights Amendment in the 1920s had ever imagined. This includes racial equity. This includes climate justice. This includes everything, because gender discrimination and sex discrimination is intertwined into every single element of our entire lives. It includes economic justice, as we talked about before with the pay gap. It includes so much more than anyone could have ever expected. And so a little bit more about that history, which I'm so happy to touch on, because as a national policy director for Generation Ratify, this is something we deal with and focus on with so much of our time. We obviously have the issue of the deadline, which we touched on a good amount with Representative Maloney, and I'm so happy to have heard that from her. Representative Maloney, you are surely an inspiration to all of us, especially in Gen Z. But beyond just this issue of the deadline, there's also this entire judicial battle with the Equal Rights Amendment. There are so many states that are trying to rescind their ratifications. They're saying we passed this in the 1970s and our ratifications aren't valid anymore, which again, there's nothing in the Constitution or any law that says that you can do that. So there is this entire judicial aspect to the battle as well. And actually, something that Generation Ratify did this past summer was we filed an amicus brief in a court case where we basically included that youth aspect. And we said that the Equal Rights Amendment is so intersectional. It is so important. And just because it was first written in the 1920s and first passed by Congress in the 1970s, that does not mean it is not important in today's world, and that it is still just as important now as it ever was. And we are fighting just as hard for the ratification and final passage of the Equal Rights Amendment. And another thing that I love to hear from Senator Spearman is that we owe it to the people who were fighting for it in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s. But we also owe it to the people of the future. We owe it to the people in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s, but of the 2000s, not of the 1900s. We owe it to the future, and that's what Gen Z's voice is. So I'll pass it on now.
Thank you so much. You're such an inspiration. I'm not sure if you saw in this group, we were all getting a little teary-eyed and snapping, and yes, thank you so much for highlighting that this is intersectional. It's intergenerational, like the Women's March. And it's just, I'm so inspired by you, Lizzie. So thank you so much for all you do and all you continue to do. So we're going to go to the actors after we talk in a few minutes to talk about their activism, which is instrumental here as well, as you all know. But I wanted to go to Grace really quickly. Also Gen Z, actually Gen Z, not wannabe like me. Grace, tell us about your work with Voters of Tomorrow, and also what got you interested in activism and fighting for the ERA.
Sure, yes. So I am Grace Friedman. I'm also 16 and a junior in high school, and I am the digital director for Voters of Tomorrow. So I actually started with Voters of Tomorrow at the beginning of this year, and we've been doing work, or at the beginning of last year, sorry, almost a year ago now, to and we were focusing on getting out the vote for the 2020 election and educating youth voters. And now that the election is over, we've done our jobs. There's still lots to do, but we were like, what can we continue to do to keep change, to keep getting voices heard? And this is when we were like, heard about the fight for the ERA and people like Lizzie fighting with Generation Ratify. We were like, this is, I can't believe this isn't already in the Constitution already. Like, this is something that we need to take hold of and get it done once and for all. Because I'm sure Lizzie can agree with me here. Like, we grew up around the feminist movement, and we've seen thousands and millions of amazing women that have come before us and have fought so long, since the suffragists until even at the Women's March a couple years ago. But it's time to finally finish the fight. And I think that's Generation Z, that's our time. It's our time to finish the fight, get the Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution for good, and be able to close those pay gaps and really just have equality and equity, like Senator Spearman was talking about, for all. And one part of that Equal Rights Amendment that we've touched on a bit, but I don't think we've talked about enough yet, is that it explicitly, even as it was written so long ago, it will guarantee equality for all people. The language that it uses when it says sex rather than men and women, like most of the Constitution does, really makes sure that it will guarantee equality for all genders, all marginalized people, and we'll all finally be able to have this equality that we've been talking about for so long.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to toss it back to
So
Joy.
amazing, so amazing, so inspiring, magical, thoughtful, articulate. Just, I'm like, I have girl crushes right now. Also, artistic girl crushes on some of my favorite women on the screen right now. And I don't even know how to do this. There's Tara Strong and Lisa Ann Walter and Michelle Hurd and Lauren Tom and Frances Fisher, my family, my girls. I want to talk about what is going on in your world and how this affects you and how it has affected you historically. And there's so much for us to talk about. So Lisa Ann has her hand wide.
Listen, I just want to say, based on those beautiful young women speaking and their activism, that they remind me so much of myself when I was a kid. And I mean, I come from a family of activists. Give me 1 second, I'm going to give you a brief history. I had a poster of Shirley Chisholm on my wall. I marched for the ERA like you did, Lizzie, in DC, because I'm from the other side, Maryland. I stuffed envelopes for Barbara Mikulski. As soon as I could sit up at a table, I was cold calling. And that's when we didn't have, you know, it wasn't digitized. You had to actually look on the, Representative Maloney remembers, there was a big book called The Rolls, and you had to like find a number. And I'm like, this is Peep Squeak voice. Can you please vote for Barbara Mikulski? I mean, people must have thought I was insane. But it was crazy to me in 1971 as a second grader that we didn't have equal rights under the law. It didn't make any sense. And you guys are 16 and you're still saying it. This was me speaking at the Women's March for the last 3 years. I'm back from my 3rd year. I'm back from my 4th year. I can't believe I'm still saying this. We haven't passed it yet. So all of us who have been lifelong activists, who have, by the way, when I was pushing for the ERA in 1971, I pooled my allowance money and I got the first subscription to Ms. Magazine that was coming out the next year. I was not like the other kids. I love that Lizzie and Grace are supported in your efforts. God bless you, God love you. I was not popular because this mouth in 2nd grade was surrounded by a lot of girls and boys saying, why do you want to be a boy? Why do you want to use the boys' room? Why do you want to fight in a war? This is the end of Vietnam, remember? Why do you want to do all that? They attacked me. They were mouthing Phyllis Schlafly talking points that now everybody is hip to. But as a little kid, I was being attacked with it. I stood firm. I said, because it's right. Unbought and unbossed. It's right. And I still say that. I cannot believe we're still going down this, that they're still using those messages, messaging of misogyny. But I want to correct you on one little thing. We will never finish this fight. we will pass this, we can finish this part of it. But just as we're seeing in Georgia with these Jim Crow 2 laws, just as we saw, I told in 2016, I was all over the Twitter sphere saying, please guys, just because you grew up with these rights, don't think that they are ingrained. They are not codified into our life. We are not constitutionally equal. And as we saw with heartbeat laws passed all over this country and all the other things they did to diminish our rights and what they're still doing, you are never going to be completely finished or completely equal. Well, I won't say never. I won't say never. But if someone to tell me at 15, at 7 and 8 years old, Grace and Lizzie, that I was still going to be fighting this fight, that I was going to be speaking in front of, as you say, 750,000 people we had in LA for the Women's March, saying, I can't believe we haven't passed the ERA yet. It makes no sense. I wouldn't have believed you. But we are strong. We are invincible. And I will say that one of my 4 kids is a songwriter, and he works at Universal. They gave him a choice of any of their song libraries to redo for a commercial, and he picked I Am Woman as an homage to me. And of course I cried when he played it for me. I'll play it for you guys at the end. It's really good. I can't think of anything else I want to say. There was somebody that asked a question, but I'll wait until later when we're answering questions to get to it. But hang on one second. I wrote some stuff down.
Michelle
Okay.
unmuted. Let her
I'll
come
jump
back on.
No, I'm done. Honestly, I just want to say this as we move forward with you guys that are working with the young people that are working with other young people. Just let them know, like I have been trying to say, it's not over. Don't let your guard down. It's not going to be over. We are going to keep pushing, and you have us old ladies, and you know we're old because our computer is not below our chins. You guys are all looking down. We are not. So you will have all of us behind you pushing every step of the way. If you didn't know, now you know. We are here. Go get them, kids. Behind you.
Lisa, you just cracked me up. That yeah. You know, you guys, you young ladies, you really did move all of us. I mean, tears came to my eye. All I could think of was like when I was 15, 16, I think I was just a punk, you know. I don't even know if I was thinking about all this stuff. But you know, growing up as in a biracial family, my father's Black, my mother's white, and growing up in Greenwich Village, New York, I grew up in a marginalized society. Like everybody I know is of the taboo sort of world. You know, I knew transgender people before Transparent was on TV, you know what I mean? And it became, you know, my father and Maya Angelou created a Matinee for Freedom, which was a fundraiser with my godfather, Godfrey Cambridge, to raise funds for Dr. King. And my father would march whenever he was called upon. He was actually blacklisted for decades for working with Dr. King. So, you know, one of the things that I think Lizzie was saying that is really true, and I've noticed hugely from my civil rights activism work, is that when marginalized individuals get the rights, and advocate for rights and equality and equity, we benefit everybody. Everybody. It's not that we're fighting for one, we're fighting for all. And until, like Lisa was saying, she was referring to the struggle of how it will have to continue. As long as cis heterosexual males are in charge, they're going to only think of their rights. Women think of everyone's rights. You know, Jolie said at the very beginning that she's a mom of 5. And so do you understand what that means? That means when Jolie wakes up in the morning, because she has a hubby too, she thinks of herself 7th. She thinks all these people, bop, 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 bop. And then she goes, what's the other thing I was supposed to do? Oh, feed myself. Because that's what women do. And what I love about you young people, is that you got the message that I try to tell my sisters, my female sisters, which is what I learned from the airport, from the stewardesses. Put your oxygen on first. Put your oxygen on first, and then you will help the many. And what I hear from you guys is that you are already thinking about helping the many. And that is what is imperative. We all know, and as all my sisters here know, through all of our activism work, the only way to actually change, systemically change things for the better is through legislation, is to have things ratified, is to put things in the Constitution. It's ridiculous to think that we don't have that in our Constitution, that we are still thought of as second-class citizens, that we're thought of as an afterthought. We are part of this community. And not only are we part of this community, but as I was just that example with Jolie, we create this community. From women, from marginalized individuals, from the sweat that rolls off our back, we built this country up. And to not have equity, when we're doing this is so egregious that it cannot stand. It cannot stand. So I applaud you guys. I am so behind you guys. I will be side by side with you. I can't believe how woke you people are. And I want to work for you in whatever way we can. It's so important that we get this through, that we become part of the Constitution, that we are seen. And Lizzie's point is absolutely astute. When we say sex, it's now no longer male, female. We have all our non-binary. We have our inclusive society, which has been here since the beginning of time. There's not new things that are popping up. We have all been here since the beginning of time. We are all brothers and sisters in this fight. And I'm so humbled and empowered and inspired by you guys. So yeah, let's keep it. Let's keep the torch to the feet of the people who are trying to oppress us until they have to move off the burner and get away and let us have our say. So yay.
Thank you, Michelle. Beautiful. There were some questions. Tara, do you see these questions in the chat? Do you see the chat at all? People are asking, before we lose Representative Maloney and Senator Spearman, I apologize. They're asking about the filibuster. I know it's going off topic, but there's all these questions asking who's going to torch that, who's going to help us with those moves.
Well, it's under consideration. I support removing the filibuster. I've signed on to letters and press conferences and everything else. And let's get a simple majority so that we can pass these things. It's up to the Senate. President Biden has called for changing the filibuster and bringing back the talking filibuster, but it doesn't get rid of the whole filibuster. It's under discussion like many other things in front of Congress now. I am very pleased that we did pass the Recovery Act, putting over 1.9 trillion with direct payments to people, to healthcare, to hospitals, to food, to rental assistance, transit, you name it. It's coming out, checks coming out this week now to people to help our economy, and making vaccinations our #1 priority. Everybody should get vaccinated as soon as your time comes up, but we are using the Defense Production Act to rev up the doses and get them out. The president's promised to have everyone vaccinated by the end of May, or have enough doses to really help people. We're now in a race with the virus. The virus is out front. The only way we can win this race is to get out in front of the virus with vaccinations for people. So that's a top priority. We're moving in a lot of directions, but hopefully this Congress will remove the filibuster too.
Thank you.
In the Senate. Decision.
Frances Fisher, my sister from another mister. Want to jump
Hello.
in?
Hello. Lizzie and Grace, oh my God, my heroines. It's like the first women's march that we were all at, right? I saw this little sign of this elder woman who was probably in her 80s. She says, I can't believe I'm still doing this shit. So cute. I just wanted to give you, oh, you guys, stop it. They're barking in my favor. I just wanted to let you guys know a little history about me, just so you know where I'm coming from. I grew up overseas. I was born in England and traveled all my life. So this whole thing about put the mask on yourself, I knew it when I was 4 years old, back in the 50s. That's always been something I've thought about. You guys, stop it. Hey, I'm sorry. But I grew up with people speaking different languages, different skin colors, eating different food. living different lifestyles, living different cultures, Turkey, Italy, Brazil, Colombia, Canada, Iowa, Texas. And when I finally, or the first time I experienced bigotry was in 1965 when we moved to Texas, and that was integration for those of us who are old enough to remember that. That's the first time I heard kids saying negative things about other kids because of the color of their skin. And that woke me up. And then we started studying the Constitution, and that phrase, all men are created equal. And I raised my hand and asked my teacher, what about the women? I'm sure we've all asked that same question. But the silence, there was a complete silence, and I felt frozen in place and embarrassed, like I did something wrong because I asked a question that had no answer. So those were my formative years. I've been, many different protests over these years, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I'm so glad to know that we don't have to go back and start over, right, Representative Maloney? We're going to go forward.
We're going to certainly try. We have a big battle, not only once we pass it in the Senate, it'll be challenged. There's no question. It'll be challenged by us if we lose. It'll be challenged by our opponents if we win. It'll ultimately end up in the Constitution. It's something really worth fighting for. Why are they fighting so hard against it? And one of their arguments, they always say, oh, well, you don't need it. Well, if we don't need it, it's not going to have ramifications, then why are you fighting so hard? And when you see that so many countries have it in their Constitution, we don't have it in our Constitution, and that it's been such a long battle for something that so obviously should be so fair and should be part of our life, is like having a glass of water. It shouldn't be so contested, but it has real ramifications. I just want to throw this out to show an example in recent history of something outrageous. I worked with the great Patricia Schroeder on a bill that outlawed female genital mutilation. And about 2 years ago in Michigan, they overturned that bill. And the Trump administration refused to take the position of our country to battle it in the Supreme Court. So now I'm working on a bill to put the bill back in again. But there's ways that they chip away at us. Mutilation is legal now in Michigan, and it's 2021. It's like outrageous beyond words. So I just
marriage too, right? And, yeah. Mm. Oh.
So something and sexual violence. We added to the Violence Against Women Act in 1994. That was the first bill I worked on when I came to Congress that year, and it was authored by Schroeder and Biden. He was then a senator. And we've reauthorized it. It's very important. It treated crimes against women as a serious crime, nothing to be swept under the rug. But part of that bill, we added the right to sue in cases, women could sue in cases of sexual violence. And the very famous Christy Brancala case, where she was gang raped in front of all these people. It wasn't a question of, we don't know what happened. She said, he said. She was raped. One of them confessed, goes to the Supreme Court, and they throw it out on a technicality. Equality, rape is not a technicality. It's assault on a woman that has permanent damage sometimes to their self-confidence and their mental being. And it was thrown out of the Supreme Court. So once we get women in the Constitution with our equality, they can't throw out sexual violence cases against us. We would have the right to sue. There's so much in it that really is so important to us protecting and enforcing our rights. So it's worth fighting for in any way, shape, or form. I see it sort of like a political campaign. As Senator Spearman knows, when you're fighting a campaign, you're fighting in 8 different directions at once with fallback positions and everything else. And we have to just do that with this too. We have to just make it happen. And if they stop us one way, we're going to go another way. They just got to know that we're never going to give up. As our founding mother said, failure is impossible, and it's impossible with this quest too.
I yield my
Thank you.
time.
Tara, come join the conversation, Tara Strong.
Hi, goddesses and friends of
Sing
women.
us a song, Tara song.
He's
Sing us
impeachable. I am so honored to be part of this panel. I am so touched by the younger generation, inspired by the women that came before me. Maloney, Spearman, you're absolutely brilliant. I just want to say that to the younger generation, it's inspiring, it's beautiful, keep going. When my grandmother was 16, she convinced her entire family to get on a boat and leave the pogroms in Russia. And her mother, who lived in fear, said, if we die on this journey, it's your fault. And when women start standing up together and fighting for each other, magic happens. And my 16-year-old grandmother saved a generation. And for those of you that are picking up the torch and carrying on for our ancestors and lighting the way for our descendants, thank you. It's just so, so beautiful and so important. And I think in general, the fact that 80% of this population doesn't know that the ERA hasn't passed, things like this are really important to educate people so that they understand why it's important to have it in the Constitution. I actually didn't become political until I was enraged by the misogyny that was so visible and so loud. And I think it's very true that when everyone understands that we are one, regardless of sex, regardless of color, religion, age, country of origin, sexuality, one, when people understand this, these particular debates will fall by the wayside. And since today we're talking about women and equality, the United States has often throughout history aspired to be a moral leader in this world. And this is where we haven't lived up to those standards. And I think especially over the last 4 years, we have a lot of damage to undo. And we really have to show the rest of the world that we want to step up our game and make some strides to make up for the past horrible years and how far behind we've fallen. And to speak to the discussion on poverty, women are 42% more likely to live in poverty than men. 75% of elderly Americans in poverty are women. The gap in poverty rates between men and women is wider in America than any other place in the Western world. And it's so important that the women are coming together, that they're fighting. 52% of the population are women. Such a small percentage are in Congress. It's amazing to have women voices coming together, having their say in things and fixing problems. I mean, when we talk about COVID, the 3 countries that have done best during this pandemic were run by women. We look at New Zealand, Iceland, Germany, these are all women. And like a lot of my sisters said here before, when women come together and when friends of women come together, we help each other. We are empathic souls that only want what's best for each other and our fellow men and women. So I just want to thank all the people here who are fighting for this, who see this, who understand that without it being in the Constitution, our rights are not guaranteed. It is too easy for someone to throw out a lawsuit because it's not clearly stated in the Constitution. I don't think people understand how vital it is that the ERA become part of the Constitution. So yes, let's do it for our descendants and our ancestors, and let's do it today for Ruth. And I just want to thank everybody for being here and for giving me a voice today.
Hey, Jolie, I just want to step in for just 30 seconds. I'm going
Yes, please.
One of my younger brothers passed away very suddenly last Saturday, and we're having a family Zoom, and I think I may have missed some of it. But I just needed to say this. Many times when people think about the ERA, they think about the face of the ERA as being white women. And we have got to make sure that we smash that fiction. We all know about Shirley Chisholm. I want to put another name in there, Fannie Lou Hamer, who was denied the opportunity to sit on the floor as a delegate from Mississippi and fought all of her life until she died, I think it was in the 70s, early 70s. when we stop and we think about the ERA, even our own vice president has worked for that. So every time we talk about it, let's be conscious of the fact that it's too easy to divide us along ethnicity and color lines if we're not integrating our conversation so that our conversations look like all the people we're fighting for. And so, I mean, I've enjoyed being here. And so one last comment: when we were making statements on the floor just before we voted for the state ERA, one of my colleagues said, well, why do you have it? Why does it have to be for women? Do you have anything for white men? I think all of this is just, I think this is prejudice too, because there's nothing there for me. And that's one of the arguments that, it's too easy for people to say that. And then, then for us to feel unconscious about responding. But, fear is not something that I know. And I said to him, you're already there. Everything that happens in not just this country, but everything that happens in the world is really based upon the norms of white patriarchy. Okay, white patriarchy, heterosexual patriarchy. So you are there already. All right. What we're trying to do now is to make sure that the other people that live on this planet are recognized as equal. He took issue with the word sex, why do you have sex? Why do you have sex? And, and I'm like, well, because that was the language that was used when it was, articulated. If it had been, nobody should be, denied equality on the basis of the fact that they eat vanilla pudding, they would have put that in there. This is the language that they use. So one, let's make sure that our conversations are always flavored with all of the people we're fighting for. Make sure that we never let them just talk about this from a white woman's perspective. White women got the vote in 1920. My mother and grandmothers didn't get it until 1965. But we still fight. Okay. So thank you all so much. And I'm going to check out. Please keep my family in your prayers. This is a rather difficult time. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. I was just something that I wanted to tag on to that. And I was just thinking, as we see these amazing faces of women, is that some of us are raising boys. Raising up good men is also very vital to this fight, and teaching them and having them stand beside us, behind us, uplift us, all the teaching our young boys to be to represent us in the world and in politics and in decision making. Lauren, Tom, Beauty, come join the conversation.
Thank you. First of all, I'm so honored to be a part of this incredibly strong, vocal, active group of women, and so impressed with Lizzie and Grace. And unlike many of you, Lisa and Anna, I am very new to being an activist in the sense that I was raised to be silent and polite. And it's actually taken me a lot of interpersonal growth to gather my courage little by little. And I have a 17-year-old and a 20-year-old, two boys. And I have to say that they've actually pulled me in to becoming more active and brave, and to really fight for the issues that have always been important to me. Like I've been an ambassador for Homeboy Industries for the past 12 years, and like working with marginalized people. But everything during this pandemic has come so much into focus. And I just heard this great quote the other day by Dr. Edith Eger, who says that the opposite of depression is expression. And so it's time. It's so time. I have had so much fear with all of the anti-Asian hate crimes happening right now, and just so much heartbreak around so many issues. And so I feel like and just even in the past in my career in the business, feeling like I've accepted a salary that was a fraction of what my other castmates have made. and that happened to myself and my fellow actor who was African American. The two of us got paid and at the time I was so grateful to have the job, and I told my agents, like, I don't want to make waves, like, please don't lose this job for me. And I just, at this point, I feel like I've got to stand somewhere for for myself and for the future generations. And so I just feel like these days, at my age, I just want to, just encourage and just applaud and people like Lizzie and Grace and my children who are like fighting this fight. I'm so deeply grateful for who you are. And I'm not your mom, but I'm so proud of you girls. And it's just how, and if anyone's, watching this, I'm probably preaching to the choir if you're watching this, but if you happen to be Asian and you have a similar trajectory that I had of feeling like this is not how I was raised, it's not in my bones, stand up. It's time. We don't really have any choice anymore. This is like becoming life and death, literally. And so I just encourage you to use your voice. Your voice can be so powerful. And so that's my story.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Everybody in the chat is like, you have me bawling, and they're so moved by that. We're at an hour, and I just wanted to say that, and those of you who know me know that I don't take yes for an answer, and I don't know how to say this word. It starts with an N and ends with an O. I don't know how to say that. And I refuse to learn that and put it into my vocabulary. So I feel that way about all of you, that I always ask you to be a part of things, and that you always, with a resounding yes, come on and speak your truth and speak with passion. And now we have these young humans that are part of the tribe. And if there aren't any questions, there was a question about how men can help, but I think did we answer that? I mean, they just Representative Maloney, and they're asking how men and how people in blue states can convince Republicans. That's the question.
Every like-minded men have been in the battle from the beginning. They were in Seneca Falls when they signed the sentiments. There were like-minded men that were there. Elizabeth Cady Stanton's uncle was one of the great abolitionist leaders and was very supportive of her efforts. And men are the majority in Congress. So we didn't pass the bill in the House of Representatives removing the deadline for the ERA without the help of many, many like-minded men. And Pat Spear made the comment that women are not always with us. She had some women in Nevada vote against the Equal Rights Amendment, she said. So we need to encourage and accept and work with and express our appreciation to all the men that have helped us get to where we are now. And will certainly be with us when we go across the finish line. I think one point before I get off, because I've got another community meeting I've got to go to, is that our rights should not be at the whim of who's the president, who's the head of the Supreme Court, who's the speaker in the House and the leader in the Senate. It should be guaranteed in our Constitution. And it became very clear to me during the Kavanaugh hearings, when all these terrible things were out there about him and his prior decisions didn't bode well for our rights and his position on the court. And I said, why am I so upset about Kavanaugh? I should be putting my time into the document that he interprets. If we get into the document, we're protected. Who cares who's on the Supreme Court? They can't take away our rights. They have to enforce them. It's the Constitution. So that's how important it is. It's bigger than anything. And we've got to get it in there. So I'm going to say goodbye. I'm inspired by these young people and by your song and by all of your statements. You make me feel stronger going back to Congress and fighting for our rights. Thank you so much. We did pass one of my bills. It took me 20 some years to pass a bill creating a national museum on the Mall dedicated to half the population women. How can we empower women if we don't even see them? And That was an effort.
Yay!
So we've had
Bravo.
success.
Thank you so much for getting that passed.
Thank
The
you.
Thank you.
gold-
So
The
excited.
gold ribbon is the ERA. We have to keep our eye on the prize. Thank you. I've got to go. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for joining us. Amazing.
Thank you so
What
much.
what a beautiful way to spend an hour on a Sunday. Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you
I
so
want
much.
I want to throw it to Grace as for a final thought, if that's okay. And thank you guys for lighting a fire under us and inspiring us. And we adore you, and call on us when you need us, and we will be here right beside you. Grace Friedman.
So I just want to finish us off with a quote that I found that I loved from Supreme Court Justice Scalia, who said, "Certainly the Constitution does not require discrimination on the basis of sex. The only issue is whether it prohibits it. It doesn't." And so with that, I wanted to thank you all so much for having this conversation with us, because as we can see, it's time. It's time to put it in the Constitution. It's time. So thank you.
Thank you. Unmute, everybody. Unmute.
Thank you. Thank you.
much.
Yay.
Brava, ladies.
Great. Thank you,
Bravo.
Jolie.
Have a beautiful Sunday.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jolie.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Sarah Beth. Thank you, Grace and
Inspiration
Lizzie.
all
Thank you.
around. Inspirations. Beautiful.
So great to meet you.
Love it.
Everyone.
Love it. Love it.